loosely relates to what we were talking about, which is about being lied to by authority, which is the whole Google Search Console thing. So Google Search Console is Google's own tool. It's completely free, and it looks at your website search performance. So it shows you,
on Google.
On Google, yeah. What pages are being indexed by Google, how they're being served, what keywords your pages are ranking for, how many times people have seen them in search, and ostensibly how many times people have clicked them in search too, which is hugely useful because, for example, Google Analytics, which is the other sort of go-to free analytics
there is
tool,
a paid version of that.
Yeah, for measuring website performance, doesn't tell you what search terms people have clicked to find your website. And you can sort of marry Search Console and Analytics if you're clever, but it's quite difficult. But for a long time, Google Search Console was sort of like the gold standard, right? And it's like, if you want to know how your website is performing in search, you look at it and you say, okay, it says 650 people have found my website this month. Fantastic, through search. 50 of those people have found me by typing in Red Evolution. And the other 550 found me from an assortment of other keywords. Fantastic, brilliant. Now I have some useful marketing intelligence. I can go away and make decisions on the basis of that. However, if you ever look at the sort of monthly total visits from search, clicks, and then you look at all of the things where it breaks it down into the per search term report, the two numbers don't add up.
They're not even close, are they?
They're not even close. No.
You looked into this, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I looked into it because it's actually really annoying, and it confuses a lot of people because you can say to somebody, "Oh, look, your search performance up. Loads of people have found you in search this month," and then they say, "Okay, great. Where did they come from?" And then you're sort of guessing. Because you can say, oh, well, I think about 60 came, from branded search, and I think about 30 came from this really important keyword we're trying to rank you from, but we're not 100% sure because half the data is missing, and that half the data could be attributed to any of the keywords, or none of them. It could be a completely different set of keywords we don't have data for. And it gets a million times worse once you start trying to do things like filter by country, and filter by a specific page. And one of the things you can do that's really annoying is if you say, okay, show me all the clicks I've had from search terms, including the word marketing. It'll say, oh, that's 200. Show me all of the search terms I've had that don't include the word marketing. Oh, that's 600, but the total is somehow 970 or something like that. So, it all just breaks down really quickly. And it becomes really obvious that what you're looking at is like a really sort of unsubstantiated data set. And Google's excuse for this is what they say is, for privacy reasons, they strip out anything that could identify an individual user's search behavior. Right. So they just obscure lots of the data and give you a sort of estimate instead.
Okay.
Which is,
and they say that. They say this is an estimate.
Yeah, they say that. And they do tell you that the reports won't be accurate, but only if you go digging. It's not, it doesn't tell you at the very beginning at all, which is very confusing for people who use the tool, and also really infuriating for people who are maybe not accustomed to this aspect of digital marketing where a lot of the data is quite unreliable. And people will look at you like you're a sort of lunatic when you say, well, you can't necessarily trust the data. It's not the full picture. But I think it is a really important point, and it's something that we do all have to grapple with eventually, which is that all of this stuff is a best guess, and you can make decisions using it. You probably should. You can look at trends, you can look at how clicks have increased over time and decreased, and whether the proportion of searches coming to your website from branded search or from a specific subgroup of keywords have changed over time. But you can't rely on it and say definitively 100 people searched for digital marketing services and found us.
There would be ways of anonymizing that data without taking away the thing we really wanted, which was the keyword. Yes. So, for example, if they showed us like a visit, type this into Google, landed on this page, then looked at all of these pages, but didn't tell us their IP address. I mean,
well, I think
would that not like anonymize the data sufficiently?
The individual potentially, but I think what they're more saying is that very clever people will use things like patterns in search behavior to identify people and groups of people, so they don't even collect the exact search terms that people are using to prevent that. I think it's less about individual users and more about sort of the the macro trend and giving people too much data.
Is it not also very handy that they're a bit vague with this data because it means we spend more on PPC?
Which, by the way...
is it not just commercially motivated and then hiding behind the idea of anonymity?
Well, I don't know. It's an interesting one because I think the other thing that's really interesting about Google's PPC, which, as you pointed out earlier, Google is entirely reliant on its income from PPC. Their PPC data is surprisingly poor as well. And we know this firsthand. You can use Google's keyword tool, which uses Google's own data to estimate search volumes. And
costs.
And costs, yeah. Yeah. It can tell you 30 people search for this a month, and you can put an ad up and it'll be seen by 70 people in the first day. So, and that's, accounting for all of the, the things it'll try and do to show you to irrelevant searches. And I think in general, an awful lot of stuff in marketing is guesswork, really. I think people are playing with very small data sets and then just sort of assuming. But I don't know where you sit on that, really. I mean, for me, you just go back to that thing that marketing's more art than science, ultimately. All of this data is useful.
It's about experimentation. We're way better informed, arguably, than we used to be in terms of how effective and efficient our marketing is being. But I suppose you're never going to have like absolute traceability. Like we talked today when we were talking about a project for a client. We were talking about attribution.
Yep.
And when you get like first exposure to a brand was via a pay-per-click advert 3 months ago, the chances of attributing that piece of work to that is it's vanishingly small, isn't it? Unless you can drill into it by asking the person, can you remember how you originally found us? Oh yes, I clicked an advert on Google's search page. Right, okay, thank you.
It's really funny, that sort of stuff, because especially if you dive into tools like analytics, they make a big song and dance about picking the correct attribution model. HubSpot does this too. It's like, if you want to see accurately how people found you and how they were first exposed to your brand, make sure you use the right attribution model. Is it last click, first click, is it linear? And it's like, none of that matters, because a decent chunk of your audience have definitely just Googled something on their phone and then sat down later on in the evening on their computer, and you can't track that.
What did we see recently? We had a couple of nice inquiries come in, and according to the data, all they'd done is gone straight to our contact page. Now, our contact page ranks for Red Evolution contact page if you search for it, probably. But that's about it. It doesn't rank for website management.
And nobody
or
just
HubSpot
randomly
or anything else.
Put www.redevolution.com/contact us into their browser and pressed enter, did they? No. So they've bookmarked the page, they've seen it on another device. For whatever reason, it's not traceable. And again, people are like, oh, you can't attribute the conversion. And it's like, no, especially not in B2B, where people will go back and forth from, a website 4 or 5 times before they get in touch. You'll often just see like, oh, this inquiry was generated from direct traffic, and everybody knows that's not true. Yeah,
it could be an internal email where somebody basically says, here's the contact page for this company. We've tracked them down. We think they can do what we need them to do. Here's a link to the contact page. Drop them a message and ask them if they can get in touch with us or give us a quote for X, Y, or Z.
Good luck trying to definitively track or prove any of that stuff. You just have to sort of accept that it's a little bit nebulous. And like you say, it doesn't stop you from experimenting, and it doesn't stop you from measuring the results of your experiments, and it doesn't stop you from tracking leads or, the really measurable, the things that are very sort of definitive and tangible, like a lead, an inquiry, somebody's email address. Those you can track.